Hey everyone, it's me, Othor Ferguson of Wally the Wolfpack. I'm doing a video today. I got my dogs out here. If you could actually see them, they're running amok. There's one right there. And there's one at Freya somewhere. She's running around. By the way, so what's today's video going to be about? So I was actually going to do another video of the many different types of heathens and their actual virtues. I had some technical and research difficulties with that one, so that one's going to come out at a later date where I actually got to research a little bit more on that because some of the information I found out to be old and beyond incorrect. So that one's going to come at a later date. But this video is going to be what I've learned as being a heathen. So don't mind my dog's yipping, whatever. They're chasing squirrels and stuff. So they got plenty of yard to play with. So I'm just keeping an eye on them. So if you see me kind of look that way, I'm watching my dogs, make sure they don't do anything stupid, like, run into the slough or something like that. Anyways, so this one's going to be kind of a little bit on a personal side note, right? So this one, we're going to be talking about what I've learned as a heathen and on my journey as being a heathen as well. So where we start off? Well, we're going to start off how I became a heathen first off. So the best way to describe how I became a heathen was, well, unfortunately, tragedy. As with a lot of people who actually become a heathen or pagan, something similar occurs. So this is back in 2014. My buddy died, and I was very, very present for, unfortunately. So that has a traumatic experience as well. And I'm still in the military at the time, and I'm still in the military now. I was actually on my third tour. Is you kind of get to that point where you start kind of rediscover who you are, and you have a real reflection on your mortality and stuff as when that comes around. So during 2015, I'm trying to discover who I am and what I stand for and what it means to be me, essentially. And of course, the topic came about religion, and I was kind of like, well, I want to get back into religion, but I just did not really. Me and Christianity kind of just didn't see eye to eye on certain things. However, I didn't really proclaim to be a Christian yet, or at all at that point. I was Christian before, but then I wasn't. Anyways, so I came back home, and I actually moved out of the barracks, and of course I got my own place, and I met a roommate. Well, I had a roommate who was pagan, and of course she was kind of pointing me in this direction of paganism. Now, I had no idea what I was doing. Excuse me, as far as paganism or any of that stuff goes. Now, at that time, though, when you're kind of aimless, you kind of take any sort of guidance you can kind of get, right? So, pretty much at that time, I was pretty much told your patron gods are Ares and the Morgan, Greek and Celtic, polar opposites, right? Now, some people actually do that. That's just kind of their thing. Now, the things though too, those were kind of chosen for me. That was not discovered by myself. And granted, when I was in that position that I was having a hard time really figuring out what the path I was actually going on. Now I was in Tennessee during this time, so Tennessee, still learning about paganism, spirituality, and stuff, and just kind of getting pointed in some weird directions, and kind of just get told what my path was when it actually really wasn't my path at all. So I got orders to Alaska, and at that time I was kind of like, oh man, this is awful. But it's funny though too is I'm actually here in Alaska again. I volunteered to come back because I love this state actually. So funny story about Alaska though, because I was at Campbell. We just said Tennessee. That just because it pretty much the whole thing's in Tennessee, and everyone lives in Tennessee anyway. It's on a state line. And of course, I was in Tennessee for 8 years, and I was getting kind of bored of it. I was like, man, I need to do something. I need to get out of here. I need to do something. And of course, the universe heard me, and the gods heard me too, and they said, you're going to Alaska. And I was a little upset about it first day, but then I actually embarked on a road trip to actually come to Alaska, because I drove through Tennessee, or from Tennessee all the way up to Alaska, through Canada too. Awesome road trip though. It was actually a great road trip. It's still one of my favorite road trips. The last time I went on it, not so much because my truck broke down, but still. First time, it was actually pretty awesome. Anyways, had to yell at my dogs for a second. So, anyways, So I make this trip up to Alaska. And of course, I am an aimless pagan, if you will. And of course, one of my old team leaders, he said, "Hey, you're in Alaska now, right?" I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "Hey, best place to eat, you gotta go to Silver Gulch." I was like, "Okay, I'll go to Silver Gulch." And I met one of my friends, and she pointed me to the shop. And of course, I met, my teacher there. And of course, she kind of, because I told her, like, "Yeah, my D is the Aries and the Morgan," and she's kind of like, "Okay, that's kind of weird, but all right," and of course, I actually, started talking to her more and more and more. And of course, I remember at a certain point in time, I was like, "Hey, I just need to learn some stuff. I clearly don't know what I'm doing. I need to learn some things." And of course, I became a student. And during my time being a student, if you will, I'm learning about, and I don't have like a designated path. I just know I got to be a student. And that's where the first rule actually kind of comes by. Well, actually, there's two lessons that we actually got to learn here, right? So for those who are actually new to paganism, heathenry, whatever you got, right? Whatever it is, do not let other people pick your deities for you. So what I mean by that, if someone does a little palm reading, kind of does like these little weird things, it says like, "Oh yeah, the Morgan or the Aries or Odin, they're trying to get a hold of you. You're the chosen one," kind of thing, you can kind of do this, right? You kind of walk away from that. So the things though too, right? That's for you to find out, right? No one can tell you what your deities are, right? Or which ones are actually, like, you got to find that out yourself. Now they can give you guidance on how to figure that out, but at the end of the day, you got to let them come to you, and you got to kind of you got to be in the middle. You have to meet them in the middle. It can't be just some random person saying, "Hey, your god is Odin. You got to start reading up on Odin." I'm like, well, that's not how that works at all. But, but if you want to gain certain attentions from certain deities, then yes, you should read up on them. Like if you want to learn more about Thor or try to have a better connection with Thor, then you should probably read up on Thor a little bit, and actually try to understand Thor on a deeper level. Same thing with Odin, Freyr, Njord, or even like Nerthus, or even like some of the Celtic side, if that's the route you want to go to. Caradwyn and Morgan and Bridget, that's, triple goddess right there. But, stuff like that. I'm not too familiar with the Celtic side, so I can't really comment too much on that. But there's ways to kind of go about that if you want to connect with certain deities. And you actually could, read up upon them and actually try to understand what they like and who they are and try to understand them at a deeper level. And then you actually start meditating, or some people like to pray, and it works for some people, works for some others, And of course, with that being said, don't let people actually dictate who your gods are. Find them yourself. You have to find them yourself. Now, and again, you'll discover them as you do rituals with certain people, and sometimes, you may think that certain deities are for you, but in reality, they're just there to kind of just push you to a certain direction. And that's kind of what sort of happened to me, is because, I had some encounters with some of the deities, and they kind of pushed me in the direction I needed to go to. And sometimes that's just all they are. Sometimes these deities, they're in your life for a little bit, and they're just like, "Hey, you need to focus there, or you need to focus there." And that's essentially it, right? Now, the next thing is do not be afraid to leave your comfort zone. Be not afraid to leave thy comfort zone. So be not afraid to leave your comfort zone. My dogs, they're just running around, running amok and stuff. Like I yell at them every now and then. So, anyways. But what I mean by that is I was kind of dreading leaving Tennessee, to be honest. Like whenever I was on this path. But of course, sometimes you got to leave your comfort zone. You got to leave where you're rooting down at to actually discover where you're supposed to go. Now, anyways, continue with the story. As I'm actually becoming a student, somewhere down the road, I get stationed in Colorado. Now, during this time though, before I get stationed there, I was actually getting real good with like the local groups in Alaska and stuff, and I'm still good with the local groups now. And I was getting an understanding of how groups and kindreds actually work. And then I actually was gonna go to Colorado, which, kind of volunteer for that though. Now, I go to Colorado, and of course, I see a different side of actual the spiritual path in a sense, right? So I'm still a student at this point, and at this point, I've yet to be a dueler or a sage, but I'm kind of living as one, sort of being like a wandering wise man. So I'm at this point, I'm wandering around and actually gaining wisdom and actually seeing how these other groups do things. And somewhere down the road, I see these other groups in Colorado. And I meet with them and I actually intermingle with them and actually see how they do things. And it's kind of weird though, and interesting at the same time. Like when you go from states from like Alaska, Colorado, or Tennessee to or Alaska or whatever, you're gonna notice that a lot of these groups are gonna be how they do things are gonna be polar opposite compared to what yours is. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now some things have moral gray areas, and some are kind of morally apprehensible. However, I haven't seen anything super crazy in my journey as far as like that goes. I haven't seen any like death cult or anything like that. So, let's keep it that way. But now, one of the things though too that I've learned in Colorado, I've seen people being dispersed. And here's what I mean by that. It's that there's actually a very strong pagan community in Colorado. There's actually in a lot of states, believe it or not. You just gotta know where to look. Now the thing though too is, and this is kind of pretty prominent and this is what I noticed in Colorado, but Colorado does have groups too, and they actually meet regularly and stuff like that too. I'm not trying to call any names or anything like that, but but what I'm trying to say is this is actually a shared problem throughout the country as well. As you have these people who are just dispersed all over the state, and they have no idea that some of these groups actually exist. And these groups are on Facebook and stuff. They're actually advertising their groups, including ours. We do the same thing. And I know there's people out there who had no idea who our group is. And I'm not expecting every person to know who our group is or all the groups out there. But the thing though too is there's definitely a looking for group kind of mentality around the country right now, right? And there's also a lot of self-practitioners at the same time. I've also seen that there's people who want nothing to do with kindreds, covens, or anything like that. There's just people out there who want nothing to do with any sort of organized groups whatsoever. And that can be varying for many reasons, right? Some people just don't like the way that they practice. Some people don't like some of the local politics. Because, I say in some of my videos, like in my groups, that I don't like politics. It's like the corporate America politics, but there's still politics in your local kindreds and stuff like that. There's local politics, that still exists. And of course, some of that local politics, though, actually can play a factor whether people stay or leave your actual group. So I guess that's kind of another lesson to learn, too, is understanding that each group has local politics. Some good, some really bad, some kind of just little whatever dramas and stuff. And I'm not trying to say that's like exclusive just Colorado. That's across the board. That's even if you go to our group, there's still local politics of some degree, And it's more along the lines of like events and things of that nature, right? You're not gonna go to our group and you're gonna see some actual like, you can't believe what Becky said or something. Like we're not gonna we don't have that kind of stuff. Our politics is more like how we're gonna actually plan our next events and who we got to go hold for our next events and how we're going to actually make this next event happen and, coordinate with people to actually make those things happen. That's what I kind of mean more in the local politics side of things. But now, the one thing too with Colorado is I kind of fell into a, less than stellar state of mind, but I also kind of, in a way, relearned my path in a sense. So I was kind of sidelined. Well, what's the word I'm looking for? I was sort of misplaced in a way. I kind of lost my direction. I was directionless for a bit again, Don't mind my dogs. They're just barking at squirrels, However, that was kind of one of the things I really had to learn is despite the fact that I was kind of misguided again, I had to refine my way back to my own path. And of course, I eventually did. I was still practicing rituals and still learning how to do ritual and stuff like that. And of course, sorry, it's a little late here today, but at the same time though, learning about these kind of things, whenever like you what's the word I'm trying to look for? I think the best way to describe it is when you're trying to learn your path, it's not going to be a nice paved road. You're going to be climbing some mountains. You're going to be going through some nasty rivers and swamps and stuff, metaphorically speaking, and maybe literally too, who knows. But that's your path though too. But the thing though too is you're going to get derailed off your path at some point in time. And I guess the biggest question is, how do you get back on it? And that's probably one of the biggest things, learning how to stay on your path. Learning how to stay on your path. That's probably one of the biggest things you can learn as far as being a heathen or just being a pagan goes is if you stay in it long enough, you're going to get derailed. That's just how it goes. You gotta find your way back somehow. Now then, after I kind of learned my way back, I get stationed in South Carolina as a drill sergeant. And I did drill sergeant for about 2 years. I just got done being a drill sergeant, actually. So, being a drill sergeant, that actually, I learned myself a lot of lessons being a drill sergeant, actually. And not just so much as like, just, not just about myself, but being a leader too at the same time. Because, I mean, I've been a non-commissioned officer for quite some time. But there's a certain level of leadership that you can only attain while being a drill sergeant. And it only happens if you actually put yourself in a position to learn that, right? Now, here's what I mean by that. So, while I was a drill sergeant, I eventually got recognized as a dueler, or, well, technically a sage. Sage is under the dueler umbrella. I always like to say dueler, but I got recognized as a sage, a wandering wise man, and later on, I was also recognized as a gøðì during the same time, because at this point, Wild Heathen Wolfpack was established, and it was a recognized kindred. Now, me being a gøðì and a kindred leader, and it kind of just went right there, right? It was kind of one of those things that just, it sort of happened, right? I kind of got thrown into position, and again, in my travels, seeing these people aimlessly and lost and a little bit directionless, at what point do you just continue to watch without doing something? I'm not trying to say I'm this grand shepherd or hero. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is my kindred the end all be all to all the problems in heathen? Hell no, not even close. It's just another kindred. I mean, it's a special kindred. I like to think Wild Heathen Wolfpack is a very special kindred with a bunch of very special people that are involved in it, and people who watch it and actually partake in the rituals itself. So I love and cherish each and every one of them who come and, watch the videos and stuff like that. Now, but the thing though too, mind my dogs, they're just barking at squirrels. They really want those squirrels. Anyways, yeah, they're two huskies, what can you do? And here they come. Anyways, but with that being said though, I notice, how does this pertain to me being a drill, right? So, me being a drill is, when you're a drill sergeant, if some of you who are watching this is being in the military and you're staying long enough, you're going to realize how much influence you have on the next generation. Like, it's kind of, and also that cultural, the generational difference is real. The generational divide of Gen Z and millennial is real. Trying to comprehend, punctuality is kind of something else, right? Again, these kids didn't have to rush to the TV to watch their favorite anime. They just watched it the next day on Hulu. So, try to convey that. That's a little difficult. But sidewinding here. When I learned patience and learning how to actually build, because this kindred has been built for a couple years now. It's still a new kindred, but it's still being brought up and being built. Now, with that being said, me being a drill sergeant, seeing that I'm seeing a lot of younger people, Gen Z types, leaning towards the heathen path and pagan path and stuff, and they have no idea how to get to that point. And of course, I'm like, all right, well, and the army doesn't exactly, the army does have actual stuff for pagans and stuff. In the BCT world, that's kind of, it's a little iffy just because the leadership that is and isn't there. Hold up a second. Sorry about that. So what I mean by that is how the army and basic training world goes is, or just the religious side point is, they have this thing called DRGLs. Don't ask me what that means. I have no idea what the acronym means. But essentially, it's the religious leader. And of course, depending on where you're at, you'll actually have certain leaders that actually assigned for certain religious practices, like Islam and Christianity and Catholicism and stuff like that. And of course, the paganism is kind of left out a bit. And same thing with like Buddha and some of these other things. They're kind of sort of like left out because they're not exactly as prominent in the military as people like to think. Now, towards the end of part of my military career, or the drill sergeant part, I've been noticing a lot more people are getting involved in it. Now, granted, Ace is true as the recognized army practice goes. Mind my dogs, they're being little goobers, eating snow and stuff. Anyways, but as far as like that goes, the history with the army and the actual Ace is true has a somewhat of a colored history, if you will. Now, there was actually some instances that kind of happened a while back. Now, this was like back in like the late 80s, if you will. Actually, probably a little later than that, to be honest. Now, I don't know the actual details. I could probably pull that up for you. I'll actually put a link to that below why that actually is. But of course, I believe it resulted in a soldier being murdered by someone in that faith. But of course, the army was kind of banning it for a while. But of course, somewhere down the road, the army said, well, that's actually unconstitutional to ban that because of, of a couple bad eggs. So, and for one point in time, the army actually even gave Hofmals in basic training. So it's funny because I actually, school of my buddies, one of my buddies actually had one, and actually wish I would have kept it. And one of the people I know, who's one of the old timers from way back in the day, he had one from when he was in basic. He said, yeah, they used to give them out in the 80s. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Or even, earlier than that too. So, but I noticed like my last cycle, because it was kind of a smaller cycle too. I think out of like the 100 some odd kids that were there, like 15 of them were actually interested in heathery and paganism. So the interest is definitely there. Now, if I learn anything as far as being a drill goes, as far as my spirituality path goes, is the investment of the next generation as heathens and pagans goes. And of course, that's where things kind of get a little difficult. How do we actually pass this coming knowledge to the next generation? Like, how does, for example, Wally the Wolfpack, how does this last through the generations? And the thing is, though, too, it's, well, we're going to have to make more gøðís. We're going to make more religious leaders. We're going to have to we're going to have to start training people on certain titles and stuff. And actually, and we're actually going to actually need to teach people about the lore, teach people about heathery, teach people about paganism, and we teach the next generation. Like, we have to teach the next generation. So that's kind of where that all lies. And then now I'm back here in Alaska because I volunteered to come back here. And this is my home. This is my home. There's trees in my backyard. There's a river in the back too, and there's a bunch of moose and birds and wolves and stuff, and it's great. I love it here. Now, I guess that's another lesson too, is when I was in South Carolina, is trying to connect spiritually, right? So my wife had a hell of a time trying to connect spiritually, right? And the reason being is because, and this is what I notice as a whole, because I watch a lot of YouTube, and I've been seeing other insights as far as like, universalists and, tribalists, and these are types of people as far as that goes. And seeing how they do their practices. And of course, I've seen some people like try to say like, oh, you don't necessarily need to be in nature to practice heathery and stuff. I'm like, well, you don't, but man, does it make it a hell of a lot easier though? Well, so what do I mean by that, right? So what I notice, and this is why I go to South Carolina, Columbia to be precise. So Columbia is kind of a big city, right? So Columbia, being the capital of South Carolina, is very much urban. It's very much concrete jungle. It's concrete city. And yeah, there's trees and stuff, sure, and I make offerings and stuff too, but it is definitely a lot harder to make that connection with the nature and the universe and all that stuff too when your surroundings are concrete. Now, when you've got a bunch of trees, like behind me, and you got like a little river, back there, doing meditation, it kind of becomes a little more second nature, right? It becomes a lot easier. But maybe because I actually like nature. I actually like being out in the woods and stuff. I actually like, not being inside all the damn time. When I get a little, kind of here, I just walk out here and breathe for a little bit, and life's kind of good, But here's a true little story though that I had whenever I was in South Carolina, right? So I was making meat for the first time, and I still make meat. I got a batch for summer solstice coming up. Now, one thing I was doing is, giving offerings to the land for two, right? Here's the lesson too, is give offerings, no matter where you're at, in any way, shape, or form. Any little offering that you could give, will pay dividends, right? So here's what I mean by that, right? So when I actually was making mead, or yeah, not only making mead, but also just doing my bloats in South Carolina, just from like, Samhain and Yule and all that good stuff. I had a specific tree. Me and my wife would actually make offerings to a specific tree. That specific tree just also happened to be a Carolina pear tree, and this thing was growing pears out of this tree. My buddy actually noticed it too, and we used those pears, and we kind of found out it was that tree that we've been giving offerings to for weeks and months at a time. And then we used those same pears for my wedding, for the wedding that I have with my wife, and we made mead out of it, and it was pretty solid mead actually. And of course, it kind of became part of it. So you gotta give offerings. You gotta give offerings to the land material, the house spirits. You gotta give offerings anywhere you can. Doing bloats, even like doing bloats in places that are kind of foreign to you. For example, if you live in, say, the backwoods of Tennessee, then you go to LA or something like that, trying to give offerings if you're practicing heathen or pagan, that offering it's gonna be a little trickier, right? It's gonna be a little different, because you could actually put it down a sink or put it down in the trash or whatever, but it's kind of like, is the thought's still there? It's still there, and you're still making your effort, and the effort is still there, and every little bit does count. Every little bit does add up, right? And the effort is known and is being made. And when you do that, you're still keeping that connection with the gods and the land spirits and the like. And sometimes keeping that relationship with the gods and the spirits and all stuff, and land spirits, house spirits, like it could actually be very tough, especially, moving from your place that you rooted down before and then being derooted and going somewhere else like you feel kind of foreign to. It could be pretty tough. It actually really can be, And especially like, when I do my meditations in my backyard and my back stoop, out here police sirens all the time, ambulances all the time, so it wasn't exactly, the most serenity of all places either, so it wasn't, but that's kind of thing too. It's learning how to meditate while there's distractions around. Now and again, hoodies. If you have that issue of being distracted, hoodies. One of my tunics actually has a hoodie on it, believe it or not. So, and I use that for rune work and stuff like that too. So it makes a world of difference actually, especially whenever you really need to like meditate. Yeah, hoodies well. The hood works. Now, and I'm always still learning that the actual whole being a heathen and being a gøðì, I'm always still learning. I'm no expert. I am no grandmaster of it all, really. I'm still learning just as much as anyone else, right? I mean, yeah, I may have knowledge on a lot of it, sure, but there's always a lot more to learn, a lot more about the runes, a lot more about some of the other sagas that a lot of people don't talk about, for example, like, I'm sure you all seen a book list of every, person, whatever they say, I recommend this book, that book, and that one. Is like, and of course, one they always say is like, I recommend the Icelandic saga. The Saga of Ijos, awesome. Like, that's cool. Have you read past that though? But that's the thing though too. It's 800 pages, so it's like that thick. Well, it's like just shy of 800 pages, but it's still a lot. And that's not even a complete set either. So when I say the Icelandic sagas, you say, yeah, there's that book, but then there's the actual whole encyclopedia of it, and the encyclopedia is like 6 or 7 books, And again, and I haven't read those yet either. And of course, if you ask anyone who said, I've read it all, they probably haven't, because there's definitely stuff that people haven't read yet. And of course, even then, I don't think I ever heard anyone who actually claimed they read all the sagas of the Eddas either, though, so there is that. But one thing I've also learned too, the fact that, and this is still one that is a forever learning task right here, is be a continual learner. Always do your research. Research your research, because some of the research that you find that's like, wow, that's pretty cool, come to find out it's a little outdated and it's probably not exactly correct. As I had in the last video, whenever I was about to upload, then I started doing the links to it, and I realized, oh wow, my information's wrong. So it does happen. And I was on the lines of what Thirst of True was and Roku True was, and I got those two kind of mixed up a little bit. And, you know, of course, I found out one of the things I was talking about wasn't actually anything that was any sort of value. It's just someone who just put down a Tumblr. So it was like, well, something that was passed for a while as like some form of gospel that turns out it wasn't. So, but again, redo your research sometimes. So, and again, that's kind of one of them things. It is one of those things that you have to do. Now, and again, it's a never-ending book list, which is fine by me. I like reading. So, I guess that kind of, you know, talks about a lot of where I kind of came from too. It's like, you know, granted, it was a little bitter at first, sure. You know, talk about tragedy and loss and stuff, but, and I guess that's another thing too. It's the struggle for looking for a kindred is very much prevalent and very much present too. And the thing though too is seeing some of these people actually complain about certain, like their leadership that they may or may not have, you know, or the fact that these groups are leadershipless, if you will. That's also a problem too. I guess the big thing is we need more leaders in the heathen community, but however, how do we know who would be good leaders for the actually heathen community? Now, granted, do I consider myself a awesome, good leader? I consider myself a pretty decent leader. Sure, I got my flaws and I have, you know, my shortcomings, but I also have my strengths too. I actually have, you know, my knowledge that I have, but I'm always learning. Always be a learner, you know, like, and listen to your community. As a gøðì, you got to listen to your community because you're a spiritual representative of your community. So you have to listen to your community. Listen to the gods too. Talk to the gods. Seek wisdom from the gods. Now the question is, well, the question we already asked already, being that how do we actually make good leaders for the next generation? Because I mean, that's kind of the thing too, is a lot of people are kind of concerned too, and don't mind my dogs, they're just chasing up a squirrel up a tree. Again, yeah, they're not going to get them, but they think they are. Anyways, but the fact of the being is, how do we preserve this for the next generation? So, and again, my thing is, try to train up the leaders for the next generation. Try to invest in the youth. I know people don't like to hear that. It's like, oh, this next generation's a bunch of idiots. I'm like, no, like, we still got to invest in them. Still got to invest in this generation. We still got to invest in how this goes forward. We have to invest. Invest. So, but it's kind of easy just to kind of dismiss that, say, oh, this next generation's a bunch of dummies. And some might be. I mean, we all were dummies too when we were young too, so I sure as hell was. Anyone says they weren't, well, I mean, we just don't know anyone who knows you're a dummy at one point. Still. Anyways, but invest in the next generation, but also keep alive the information that actually is legitimate out there. Like, keep it alive. And also understand that there's more and more information coming to the forefront too. And that's the thing is, the fact that people think that we know it all already about heathenry or whatever is completely wrong, because hell, we had the whole Odin's man thing come about, and I'm more than intrigued about that. I think that's awesome when I heard about that. But there's more information coming out. There's more stuff coming to the forefront, and it's only a matter of time before we get more sagas coming to the forefront, and I'm sure there is more coming out as far as more relics and writings and findings are found in the ancient Viking world and such. So be a continual student. But I think that's pretty much where we're going to end this. Anyways, stay heathen.